I first noticed Adrian during a dull Tuesday lecture on classical poetry. While Professor Morgan droned on about metaphors and enjambment, my eyes wandered across the sea of blank stares and drooping heads until they landed on him. He was smiling. Not the strained, obligatory smile of a student pretending to care, but a genuine, infectious grin that seemed to exist in its own orbit. His dark, tousled hair and sharp jawline gave him the kind of presence that drew eyes without effort. And yet, his gaze was firmly fixed on the professor, as if he were absorbing every word. When class ended, he turned to me unexpectedly, catching me mid-stare. My heart jumped as he tilted his head, his smile softening. "What did you think of the lecture?" he asked, his voice smooth and low, tinged with a faint accent I couldn't quite place. I stammered something unintelligible, suddenly hyper-aware of how ordinary I must have seemed compared to him. But Adrian didn't seem to mind. In fact, he laughed, a rich melodic sound that carried an undercurrent of mischief. "I take that as a ringing endorsement of Professor Morgan's skills," he teased. We walked out together, and from that moment, Adrian became a constant presence in my life. It was hard not to be drawn to him. He had an easy confidence, the kind that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. Conversations with him felt like a game, each word a carefully placed chess piece. He was clever, too. Scary. Clever. He could dismantle an argument with a single sentence or uncover a hidden insecurity with an offhand comment. It didn't take long for me to fall for him, though I wouldn't admit it to myself at first. His attention was intoxicating, like stepping into the warmth of the sun after years in the shadows. But there was something else about him, something I couldn't quite name. A sense of unease that lingered just beneath the surface, like the faint hum of static before a thunderstorm. It was a chilly evening in late November when Adrian invited me to a small party at his apartment. I hesitated at first. I wasn't good with crowds, but his invitation felt like an opportunity I couldn't pass up. His place was tucked away in a part of town I'd rarely visited, its old brick facade half covered in ivy. Inside, the rooms were cozy, but sparsely furnished, as if he didn't expect to stay there long. The other guests were a mix of Adrian's classmates and acquaintances, all laughing and chatting as if they'd known each other for years. Yet, despite the friendly atmosphere, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The conversation seemed rehearsed, the laughter a beat too loud. And then there were Adrian's eyes, which lingered on me longer than necessary, as if he were studying me. "Ella," he said, pulling me aside into the quieter kitchen. His smile was warm, but his gaze carried an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Do you ever feel like you don't quite belong?" The question caught me off guard, but I nodded, my guard slipping in the face of his understanding. "Sometimes," I admitted. His expression softened, but something about the moment unsettled me. I told myself it was just my overactive imagination, but deep down, I knew there was more to Adrian than he let on. As weeks passed, Adrian's charm only deepened his hold on me. Our conversations were magnetic, filled with cryptic remarks that seemed to hide meanings just out of reach. He spoke often of philosophy and art, his words painting vivid pictures that lingered in my mind long after our talks ended. But every so often there would be a moment, a flicker of something darker in his eyes, a subtle shift in his tone, that left me questioning who he really was. It was during one of those moments that I stumbled upon the first clue. We had agreed to meet at Adrian's place to work on a group project. I arrived a little early, expecting him to be home. Instead, I found the door unlocked and the apartment eerily silent. I called out his name, but there was no answer. As I stepped inside, the unease I'd felt at his party returned, stronger than before. The living room was meticulously clean, almost too clean, with no personal touches to indicate who lived there. No photos, no mementos, just sleek, minimalist furniture, and bare walls. Curiosity got the better of me, and I wandered toward the one door that was slightly ajar. It led to a small study, its walls lined with bookshelves. On the desk sat a stack of photographs, each one carefully arranged. I shouldn't have looked, but something about them drew me in. The photos were unsettling. They weren't candid shots or happy memories. They were portraits. Stark, clinical, and oddly intimate. Faces stared back at me, their expressions frozen somewhere between fear and fascination. They were all strangers, but the way they were framed made them feel disturbingly familiar. I was still staring when Adrian appeared behind me. "Ella," he said softly, his voice startlingly close. I turned to find him watching me, his expression unreadable. "You have an interesting hobby," I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice trembled. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Photography is about capturing truth," he said, "even the truths we don't want to see." There was a weight to his words that made my chest tighten. I knew I should leave, but his presence was magnetic, pulling me back in despite the warning bells in my mind. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about the photos, or the look in Adrian's eyes as he spoke of truth. The photographs haunted me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those frozen faces staring back at me, their expressions a strange mix of dread and longing. They felt like glimpses into another world, one Adrian seemed to inhabit effortlessly. I wanted to ask him about them, but the fear of what he might reveal kept me silent. Still, the weight of those images lingered, pressing against the edges of my thoughts like a splinter I couldn't remove. It was late one evening when Adrian texted me, asking if I wanted to visit his home studio. I hesitated, the memory of that eerie study tugging at me, but my curiosity and something deeper, harder to define, pushed me to say yes. His studio wasn't what I expected. It was a stark, minimalist space, tucked away in a converted warehouse, its walls painted an unrelenting white. The room felt too empty, the air too still. At the center stood a single chair, its metal frame gleaming under the harsh light of a spotlight mounted above. Nearby, a camera rested on a tripod, its lens pointed directly at the chair like an unblinking eye. Adrian greeted me with his usual easy smile, but there was a tension in his posture that set me on edge. "I'm glad you came," he said, guiding me into the room. "I've been wanting to show you this side of my work." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "It's impressive," I managed, though the words felt hollow. He chuckled softly. "Don't be nervous. It's just a chair and a camera." But it wasn't. The space thrummed with an invisible energy, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. I perched on the edge of a stool near the door, my gaze flitting between the spotlight and the camera. "Why portraits?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Adrian's smile faltered. He walked to the camera, adjusting the lens with meticulous care. "Because faces never lie," he said, his tone strangely distant. "They hold everything, the truth we try to hide, the stories we don't want to tell. You can learn everything about someone if you look closely enough." I shivered, though the room wasn't cold. "What about the people in your photographs?" I asked, forcing the question out before I could second-guess myself. "Do they know what you're looking for?" Adrian turned to me, his expression unreadable. "Sometimes," he said simply. "But often, they don't understand until later." His words sent a ripple of unease through me. I wanted to leave, to escape the oppressive stillness of the studio, but Adrian's gaze held me in place. "Would you like to try?" he asked, gesturing to the chair. The question caught me off guard. "What?" "Let me take your portrait," he said, his tone light but his eyes sharp. "You might see something in yourself you didn't know was there." Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, but my voice betrayed me. "Okay," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop it. I sat in the chair, its cold metal pressing against my back. Adrian adjusted the spotlight, the bright beam isolating me in a pool of harsh light. The rest of the room dissolved into shadows, leaving only me and the camera. My heart hammered in my chest as he stepped behind the lens. "Relax," he said, his voice gentle but commanding. "Let your mind wander. Think of something true." True. The word echoed in my head, bouncing off memories and fears I'd buried long ago. The intensity of the light made it impossible to see Adrian clearly, but I could feel his presence, his gaze piercing through the lens. The camera clicked once, then again. Each flash felt like a jolt, stripping away some unseen layer. By the third click, my breathing had grown shallow, my pulse erratic. Something about the process felt invasive, as if Adrian were peeling back my thoughts and laying them bare. "Perfect," he murmured, his voice low and reverent. "You're seeing it now, aren't you?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. The light burned against my skin, and the room seemed to shift around me, its edges blurring. For a moment, I felt untethered, as if the chair beneath me had vanished. Then, abruptly, Adrian switched off the light, plunging the room into a merciful dimness. When my eyes adjusted, Adrian was standing in front of me, holding the camera. His expression was one of quiet triumph, but there was something else in his eyes, something I couldn't name. "I'll show you the prints later," he said, helping me to my feet. "You'll want time to process them." I left without another word, my thoughts tangled in a web of confusion and unease. That night I dreamt of the chair and the light and the camera's relentless gaze. And when I woke, I couldn't shake the feeling that Adrian had taken something from me, something I hadn't meant to give. The invitation to the winter gala arrived a week later, an elegant card tucked into the pages of a book Adrian had lent me. "You should come," he said when I confronted him about it. "It's the perfect place to unwind. Just be yourself." His smile was disarming, but his words felt like a warning. The night of the gala, I wore a simple black dress that clung to me like a second skin. The grand ballroom was bathed in soft golden light, its polished floors reflecting the glittering chandeliers overhead. Couples danced to a live orchestra, their movements fluid and effortless. It was beautiful, but the atmosphere felt stifling, like a stage set for something unseen. Adrian found me near the edge of the dance floor, his suit tailored to perfection. "You look stunning," he said, offering me his hand. "Shall we?" I hesitated, but his gaze was magnetic, pulling me toward him. As we danced, the world seemed to blur, the music fading into the background. Adrian's movements were graceful, his touch firm, yet gentle. But there was an edge to his smile, a shadow that darkened his eyes. "Do you trust me?" he asked suddenly, his voice cutting through the music. The question startled me. "Of course," I said, though the words felt hollow. Adrian leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. "Good, because tonight you'll finally understand." His cryptic remarks sent a shiver down my spine. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened, just enough to keep me in place. Around us, the dancers seemed to move in unison, their faces blurred, their expressions vacant. The room felt alive, the air charged with an unseen force. As Adrian spun me across the floor, I realized the truth. I was no longer part of the audience. I was part of the performance. The music grew fainter, distorted, as though it were echoing from an abyss. The golden glow of the ballroom dimmed until the chandeliers above flickered like dying stars. The once vivid faces of the dancers blurred further, their features dissolving into indistinct smudges. My pulse quickened, my breath shallow as Adrian guided me through the surreal haze. "Adrian," I said, my voice trembling. "What's happening?" He smiled, but it was different now, hollow, like a mask barely concealing something darker. "You're starting to see," he whispered, his hand steady against mine. "The truth always reveals itself when the light fades." I tried to pull away, but the world spun, and my feet seemed rooted to the polished floor. Around me, the dancers moved with mechanical precision, their steps synchronized to an unheard rhythm. Their silence was deafening, their hollow forms like specters trapped in an endless waltz. Adrian released me suddenly, stepping back into the shadows. "You've been searching for meaning," he said, his voice echoing unnaturally. "Tonight I'll show you what lies beyond the surface." "Stop this," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "I don't want to see whatever this is." He tilted his head, his expression almost pitying. "But you've already seen. You can't unsee it now." The spotlight from his studio chair returned, blinding and cold. It shone down on me from above, isolating me in a pool of light. I shielded my eyes, panic rising as the air around me thickened. Whispers began to fill the space, soft and insidious, curling around me like smoke. They spoke in fragments, my name, half-formed thoughts, echoes of my own doubts. "Ella," Adrian's voice called, clear and resonant amid the cacophony. "Step forward." The floor beneath me shifted, the glossy surface rippling like water. I stumbled, struggling to maintain my balance, as the ballroom faded completely. In its place was the chair from Adrian's studio, now sitting in the middle of a dark expanse. The camera faced it, its lens gleaming like an unblinking eye. "No," I whispered, backing away. But my movements felt slow, my body heavy, as though invisible hands were pressing me forward. Adrian emerged from the shadows, his form impossibly sharp against the darkness. "Do you trust me?" he asked again, his voice softer this time. The question hung in the air, the weight of it suffocating. "I don't know," I admitted, the words barely audible. He smiled faintly, stepping closer. "This isn't about trust, it's about choice. Sit in the chair, Ella, and you'll see everything. The truth about me, about yourself, about the world you've been blind to. Or you can leave, return to the life you've known, and forget this ever happened." His words chilled me. "And if I leave?" I asked. His smile faltered, and for the first time, I saw hesitation in his eyes. "Then you'll always wonder. The questions will haunt you, even if you can't remember why." The whispers grew louder, their fragmented words forming a chorus of pleading and warning. I glanced at the chair, its metal frame cold and foreboding, and then back at Adrian, whose expression was unreadable. The weight of the moment pressed down on me, the choice splitting me in two. I took a step forward. The chair loomed larger, the camera's lens following my every move. My heart thundered in my chest as I reached for the chair's armrests, the cold metal biting against my palms. I hesitated, my breath hitching. "I can't promise you'll like what you see," Adrian said, his voice low and steady. "But it will be real." I closed my eyes, sinking into the chair. The light above flared, blinding and all-encompassing, until the world disappeared entirely. When I opened my eyes, the ballroom was gone. I was standing in a mirrored room, infinite reflections of myself, stretching in every direction. But the faces in the mirrors weren't all mine. Some were younger, others older, their expressions shifting between joy, sorrow, and fear. And there, among the countless versions of me, was Adrian. His reflection smiled faintly, his eyes filled with something I couldn't name. "You've taken the first step," his voice echoed, disembodied but warm. "This is where truth begins." The mirrors rippled like water, and I caught glimpses of the photographs from his study, The faces frozen in time, now moving, their stories unfolding like living portraits. They weren't strangers anymore. They were pieces of a larger puzzle, fragments of a tapestry that I was now a part of. Adrian's voice surrounded me. The question isn't what you see, Ella. It's what you'll choose to do with it. As the reflections began to fade, I felt a strange sense of calm. The unease that had gripped me for weeks dissolved, replaced by a quiet certainty. I didn't have all the answers, but I had seen enough to understand. Adrian's world was one of truths hidden in shadows, and I was no longer a passive observer. I stepped away from the mirrors, the light dimming until only a faint glow remained. When I turned, Adrian was gone, and the ballroom had returned, its dancers still moving in their endless waltz. But I wasn't the same. I never would be again.